Hello, Stephen Hamill from NBS here, and welcome to today's webinar, Health and Safety and the RIBA Plan of Works 2020. A little bit of housekeeping to start off. The webinar will last just over 45 minutes. Everybody today's microphones are muted, but you can ask questions, make comments using the little question box on the screen, and we'll try and follow up with all of those after the session. If you want to follow on social media or make a comment on social media, we've got the hashtag NBS webinar. Just a reminder that this is part of a series of webinars looking at some of the key topics, the key project strategies that are laid out nice and clearly in the new RIBA Plan of Work 2020. On the left hand side on the taskbar here, you can see it's quite small, but the project strategies, and so far we've looked at things like fire safety, sustainability. Today we're going to look at health and safety. Today's speakers, we're going to start with Sarah Susman, Head of Technical Development at Brownrigg Architects. And then we're going to also hear from my colleague Roland Finch, who's one of the technical authors at NBS. So straight away we'll go into the presentation from Sarah from Brownrigg. Over to you, Sarah.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Susman and I'm Head of Technical Development at Brownrigg. I'm a chartered architect with more than 20 years in the construction industry. Today I'll be looking at the health and safety strategy and how to deliver it through the project stages. We will also look at why the strategy must be considered at the early stage and why it's key to securing safe construction, occupation, maintenance and demolition of a building. Health and safety could not be more to the forefront of our minds at present. So it is timely that we have reached the final section of the RIBA Plan of Work series, which will look at health and safety and its integration into design, construction and beyond. Health and safety legislation in the UK was introduced in 1974 with the Health and Safety at Work Act. Since then, there have been a number of regulations put in place to help ensure that people don't die, don't become injured, and don't get ill when they go to work. It applies across all our activities in all sectors and puts people and their health, safety and well-being at the heart of what we do as a society. The RIBA Plan of Work has been guiding the construction design professionals since its first issue in 1964, and since then has been comprehensively developed to reflect the changing times. Although health and safety had for long been included as a process activity, it was the 2013 Plan of Work that introduced the delivery of a health and safety strategy, and this has continued within the 2020 version. And this is developed alongside the CDM regulations, the latest of which were updated in 2015. Much discussion since the Grenfell fire in 2017 has been about the golden thread of building information to help ensure fire safety. However, in principle, this is what the Plan of Work has been guiding us to do all along. This building information is to be an accurate record of how the building was designed to be built and to be maintained. It includes, and always has meant to include, information regarding health and safety for all those phases. The health and safety strategy is to clearly identify the approach to be taken in a project, to identify and record all matters of relevance to the safety, health and well-being of those who construct, live and work in our buildings. So what is a health and safety strategy and why do we carry this out? We have a health and safety strategy because people are not supposed to die when they construct a building, they're not supposed to become ill when using the building, and they're not supposed to injure themselves when maintaining the building. The health and safety strategy is a plan for how these issues will be addressed in a considered and collaborative way with the client and with the other designers. We will be looking as a team to identify the safest ways to construct, use and maintain the building, being mindful of location, workers, occupiers, costs and design. The health and safety strategy is one of several key strategies that are developed through the life of the project. The establishment of this strategy will be led by the lead designer together with the principal designer and the client. To ensure that this is embedded in the project, it needs to be considered as early as the strategic design stage, as it is key to securing a proactive safety and health approach for the whole design team. The early discussions with your client are crucial as they are fundamental in establishing a health and safety conscious attitude to the design process that will in turn influence the behaviour and approach of the whole design team. By considering health and safety early in the project, it will help establish health and safety as a constant topic running through the design's development, as I'll show you in the following slides. Health and safety starts with the appointment of the design team, and therefore it starts with the client. Who is to be appointed, what they are to be appointed for, and whether they are competent and capable enough to carry out their role and responsibilities need to be considered. And by following the CDM Regulations 2015, it is clear who is to have what roles and what responsibilities they are to carry out. At this stage, preliminary information is gathered about the site and strategic health and safety risks identified. You need to understand the client's requirements as well as possible regarding the whole project, not just the design aspirations, but their attitude to health and safety, their budget, and their programme. This stage's preparation of the brief will necessarily include a high-level health and safety analysis of the site and its environs, which will be incorporated into the preliminary health and safety strategy in stage 2. At this stage, this analysis contributes to the preparation and development of the brief and will inform the feasibility studies taking place. Work with the client to put together the designer's responsibility matrix, and this will help identify any specialist health and safety advice may be needed, in addition to the appointment of the principal designer. As this develops through the project, it will clarify who will be writing the specifications and to what level of detail, depending on the programme, attitude to risk, and form of procurement from the client. Less experienced clients may need the help of a health and safety advisor to help them carry out their health and safety responsibilities. And identifying this so early will ensure that all parties understand what they are legally obliged to be doing. Work with the client and their advisor to ensure that the health and safety aspirations of the project are included within the brief and that a robust design risk management process has been established. At this stage, the core design team will be appointed and the health and safety strategy developed to identify more detailed health and safety hazards and the process to address them. There is now a greater emphasis by clients and designers on the operational aspects of the building and their effects on safety and health. There is no sense designing and constructing a building if the cost of maintaining, operating and using it prove to be prohibitive or the building difficult to maintain. This is a welcome move away from the past typical institutional approach, when if cost could be moved from capital to operational, it was preferred. Clients are now understanding that operational considerations of safety and health can affect value, marketability, and their reputation. At this stage, it will be demonstrated that these issues have been considered as part of the design and through the design process. And by demonstration, risks identified should be recorded on all relevant designers' drawings and in their reports and schedules. And records of design decisions affecting health and safety also need to be kept. In the later stages, when there is design input from the contractor, this is still proving challenging. Additionally, a preliminary operation and maintenance strategy needs to be written, with input from all the disciplines in the client, which will include any health and safety risks for these activities and how those risks are to be safely managed. What they are and how they are addressed will be influenced by the client's aspirations and attitude towards occupational health and safety. At this stage, aspects of the design start to become fixed. A lot is happening in the project now, and care should be taken that the focus on health and safety matters is not lost amongst all the other activities taking place. The health and safety strategy needs to be kept up to date and reflect the increasing amount of information available and the complexity of the project. This can be by referencing to the relevant design material that has been prepared or is soon to be prepared. In validating the architectural concept, there may be requirements for change to the concept ideas due to more detailed information becoming available and from the increased input of the other designers. Recording change is one of the key improvements that the construction industry is being asked to do in response to the Grenfell fire. At this stage, there is a risk that changes that have an impact on health and safety of construction and in use can be missed. Following the design risk management process set up in stage 1, which includes regular team meetings, should ensure that the design does not develop in such a way that later remedial work will be required to address substantial hazards. Good communication and timely information exchanges are needed to support this. Records must be kept to show the course of design decisions. All members of the design team should be identifying risks on their drawings and keeping records of these design decisions. The principal designer will be ensuring that this takes place and will be providing guidance and advice to the team as necessary. Specification details are now developed from outright specification issued in stage 2. Specifications can include guidance on risk mitigation and working procedures. This is often contained in the preliminaries, which may be developed by the QS or the project manager in consultation with the design team. Specifications and their level of performance can have significant health and safety implications, so communication with those putting the prelims together is essential. The client may need to be advised that specialist designers need to be appointed earlier in the programme than traditionally allowed for, in order that late appointments won't affect health and safety coordination late in the project, where in order to deal with them, considerable change in coordination may be required that may impact budget and programme. By now, the design risks are being closed out as far as possible, and by closing out, this does not necessarily mean eliminating them, but it certainly means at least mitigating them. By now, the procurement route chosen will affect the level of detail to particular design elements. Specialist designers may be appointed for facades, maintenance and services, depending on the project's complexity. Throughout the work stages, the health and safety file will be being developed by the principal designer in collaboration with the design team. It will not yet be in its final form due to the overlap of stages 4 and 5, with the principal contractor generally completing the document. Depending at what work stage the project was or is to be tendered, the health and safety proposals from the principal contractor should be commented on as part of the whole tender review process. This will have been made clear within the health and safety strategy. Once appointed, the principal contractor will draw up the construction phase plan, which includes all the health and safety matters, and more if necessary, as defined in the CDM 2015 regulations, before work starts on site. The construction phase is the culmination of months and sometimes years of planning and design work. Health and safety responsibility transfers from the design team to the principal contractor, and the client, together with the principal designer, will be ensuring that the correct approach to site health and safety is included and implemented in the form of this construction phase plan. Throughout this stage, the health and safety file will be developed by the principal designer or the principal contractor, and finalised with input from relevant designers and subcontractors, ready for handover to the client on completion of the project. As mentioned earlier, this is when changes made to the design can result in introducing new risks to workers and users. Good organisation, communication and team working are essential to ensure that this doesn't happen. Remember as well that Regulation 38, Fire Safety Information, requires a complete explanation of the fire strategy and any fire safety related systems to be provided to the client once approval is obtained from the building control officer or the approved inspector. Handover and closeout is a challenging stage, and the majority of the time it is carried out by the contractor. However, there are many issues when approaching handover that can result in health and safety problems, so having the design team, client and user involved can help reduce these. And there can be no doubt that an on-site handover meeting, including all these parties, can make a significant contribution to the future use and health and safety of the building. This handover meeting will include the issue of the health and safety file, an explanation of its contents, any residual health and safety risks identified, and all operation and maintenance procedures and their safe operation. This stage also includes the defects period, in which any rectification works must take into account any health and safety issues. There may also be useful feedback on the building's use and maintenance, which the client may need to include in the health and safety file. The client can now use and enjoy the building. Now is when it will become clear if the outcomes we desired at stage 1 have been achieved. Does the building deliver the client's original intent? Often new issues appear as the users become familiar with the building's operation. The building may be being used differently from what was anticipated. Further work may have been carried out, such as an internal fit-out. Responsibilities for the building, including health and safety, are now with the owner, operator and user. However, liability still lies with the team in certain areas. If risks arise or actions occur, where the root cause is traceable back to previous design decisions, there may be legal liability. And if those issues are serious, the HSE may seek to take action under CDM and other health and safety legislation. The health and safety of maintaining and using the building should be addressed in a post-occupancy evaluation, along with common issues of air quality, chemicals from finishes, lighting, air supply, and maintenance operations. A full understanding of the building in use is an invaluable tool in improving health and safety for the users and for informing future approaches to health and safety from the design team. So to summarise, buildings are to be safe for people, whether they build, work in, live in, or maintain them. People want to know that they will be safe from fire and that their health will not be adversely affected. So clients, designers and contractors must demonstrate that the building is safe, that people will not go to sleep at night or to work during the day, worrying about their safety and their health. Leadership from the start of the project and a proactivity towards health and safety in all its forms will help deliver these outcomes. And the health and safety strategy is key to setting out the process, procedures and attitude of the design team towards the health, safety and well-being of all those who design, construct, live, work and maintain the building. It provides the roadmap for the various participants to follow over the full life of the project, ensuring that even with changes to the design, to the brief, to the programme and to the budget, health and safety will always be considered. Finished. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was fascinating. Now we move on to Roland Finch, one of the technical authors at NBS.
Hello, my name's Roland Finch. I'm one of the technical team here at NBS, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the way that health and safety information and strategies can be included in NBS specification tools. First of all, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background. There's an absolute bewildering array of legislation which applies in the health and safety arena. This is just a flavour of some of it from the UK. Obviously, not everybody is going to be an expert in every single set of legislation here, and you'll see just down in the bottom left right-hand corner, we've now got legislation which is different in Scotland and Wales. But if you're going to be designing or constructing, you need at the very least to be aware of a lot of this legislation. The principal piece of legislation here is the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act of 1974. And just to give you a little bit of background, the statistics to all of this, prior to this legislation coming out 40 years ago, 40 plus years ago, the UK construction industry habitually killed about 400 people a year. I'm pleased, if that's the right phrase to say, that last year's statistics, we only killed 31, plus 7 members of the public. There were also 54,000 non-fatal accidents in construction works in the UK. Just to give you a little bit of topical context, the HSE says that is a rate of 1.31 people per 100,000 employees, which currently is roughly 3 times the number of the death rate from coronavirus. The HSE is the body in the UK which regulates health and safety. I've just put this little slide up here because there is a wealth of advice from the HSE on a whole variety of topics. But ultimately, it's up to you to make sure that you comply. They don't accept ignorance as an excuse for this sort of thing. Just wanted to touch a little bit as well on the construction design and management regulations. I know Sarah spoke a little bit about that. I want to say about information. Many of you will be familiar with the regulations, but you may not be familiar with Regulation 4 in a great deal of detail. What it says is what's written there, and it's a fairly broad definition. And this is what they talk about when they talk about pre-construction information, information in the client's possession or which is reasonably obtainable by on behalf of the client, which is relevant and appropriate and proportionate. So again, it's a fairly broad definition. There's a lot of information and it's not all held by the same person. Now, when it comes to specifying and specification, This is one of the recommendations from the Hackett report, or to give it its full title, the Independent Review of Building Regulations and Fire Safety, which was commissioned after the tragic fire at Grenfell Tower in 2017. And you can see they're not terribly impressed by the quality of information or the way in which it's tracked through a project. So in response, the 2020 RIBA plan of work has beefed up its requirements a little bit regarding the production of strategies and their implementation at each of the project stages. So let's go through the project stages. This is what the plan overview says you should be doing at stage 0. Stage 0 is right at the very start of a project. I've been with NBS for a good number of years now, and it's perhaps no surprise to a lot of you that many people in the specification world seem to think that this is the sort of stuff that you get together when you're doing the technical design stages at stage 4, but it's not. It's the sort of thing which you should be doing right at the very concept stage, thinking about the health and safety requirements, how the building's going to be built, and the sorts of people who are going to be using it when it's finally completed. And this is a screenshot. I've got a few screenshots here from NBS Chorus, which is our latest specification tool. And you can see some of the information which you put in right at the start of the job is fairly basic. What's it called, what type of job it is, and crucially, who is the client? The client has a big responsibility under CDM for health and safety, so we need to know who that client is going to be. And here's some more project information. Again, things like drawings, things like a description of the project, what type of work is involved. There's an awful lot of information that goes on the drawings. There's an awful lot of other documents which you can gather together, health and safety files from previous jobs, just fairly basic bits of information which will guide the design process, will guide the choice of building solution perhaps, but they all have a bearing on health and safety. And here's a couple of examples that I've just put up here. There may be an asbestos survey. Asbestos surveys are a requirement under the control of asbestos regulations. If it's alteration to an existing building, there should be a survey report in existence. There may be, if the site has had a previous use, being some sort of asbestos present on the site, likewise with lead. So these are the sorts of things we've said in the guidance there. It all comes under site, ground and environmental information, and they are all things which you should consider at the point at which you are considering what sort of building you're going to put up. The other sort of thing which needs to be identified fairly early on, certainly as the principal designer, the CDM regulations say the principal designer should be appointed at the very point that design commences. Now, the regulations also have a fairly broad definition of what is what consists of design, the sorts of things which are included, and basically anybody can be a designer, but the principal designer under CDM is the person who is responsible for coordinating it all. So then we go on to stages 2 and 3. There's a fair bit of overlap when it comes to health and safety between the various stages. But again, this is what the overview says for those stages. This is the point at which we are starting to implement the risk management processes. We're identifying things. We are updating the pre-construction information now that we're getting towards an architectural concept. And once more, here is some of the information and where you would put it into NBS Chorus. So we've got things like pre-construction information. We've got we're listing out the scope here. We're listing out where it is available, because it may not all be in a single document. It's not like the some of the earlier things where we had a pre-tender health and safety plan. Pre-construction information is a lot broader than that, and can, as we saw, include information from any source that the client is aware of, that they think that the contractor needs to know about. We get a little bit further down the line, as the design develops a little bit, there are things which you may want to draw people's attention to. Again, the regulations say that these should be proportionate. They shouldn't be things that a reasonably competent contractor will already know about. But certainly there will be things in the design, because the designers are developing it. It's possible that the contractor may not have seen it at this point, although it's always a good idea, if possible, to involve specialists and people like that fairly early on in the design process. Then we get down to what we might normally consider the construction phase. And again, this is what the overview says. We're getting into a bit more detail at this point. We're taking the pre-construction information. We're going through the tender phases. We're appointing a contractor. We're appointing a principal contractor, and it's the principal contractor and responsibility primarily for developing the construction phase plan and updating, if there is one, a health and safety file. The client now has responsibility under CDM for notifying the relevant authorities. So that's always one to watch out for. And again, this is the sort of information or the sort of requirements, in fact, at this point that you would be asking, perhaps as part of your tender, but certainly before any work starts on site, some detailed information about how the contractor proposes to address some of the things which are in the pre-construction information, how they're going to build it, how they're going to do it safely, how they're going to control things on site to make sure that everything is safe for the workforce and people who visit it. As I said earlier, the statistics which are gathered by the HSE on deaths and non-fatal injuries include members of the public, and it's sad to say, I think I mentioned earlier, that we killed 7 members of the public who had nothing to do with the construction activities last year. And again, here's a template within NBS Chorus that would explain to you how we would go about developing the outline construction phase health and safety plan, how it would be developed into the full construction phase health and safety plan. It's fair to say perhaps that this is a rather extensive template. It may not apply to all jobs, but certainly the headings would be relevant in all cases. Some of these things may not occur on relatively small jobs, but certainly they're things which you need to think about. When we get towards the end of the job, again, this is what the overview says. We should be looking towards developing things for end users and occupiers and people who are going to operate and maintain the building or asset once it's constructed. And again, within NBS Chorus, there's the opportunity to put together a building manual. We have a template within our specification content. This is in the preliminaries, which will allow you to have a checklist for the sorts of things which would go into the building manual. In this case, we've called it Part 4, the health and safety file, and we also have Part 5, which would cover things like operation and maintenance, training, that sort of thing. And again, important thing for end users and people who are going to use the building down the line are records. It's important to have records of what you've done, how it was done, maintenance instructions, guarantees, evidence of certification and compliance, and all sorts of other things that demonstrate that the rules that were set out right at the start of the project have actually been followed, that where decisions have been taken, those decisions are recorded and implemented and signed off where relevant. So, in summary, I think we can all pretty much agree now, health and safety is not something which we do in isolation. It's not somebody else's responsibility. It's not just left to the contractor. We don't just design buildings and leave it to somebody else. The examples which I showed you in the screenshot come out of the preliminary section of NBS Chorus, but the preliminaries and the work sections, which is the technical design stuff, is all part of a specification. And crucially, this information should all be read together. It's not something where one party does one thing and one party does the other thing. It's all part of an overarching specification document which tells the contractor or the contractors how the building is to be constructed, or the methodologies which are to be adopted, and they all should be read in conjunction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roland. So that concludes our 2 presentations, and now we've got 5 or 6 minutes for some question and answers. So I'm going to start with you, Sarah. There's a question here asking, how can technology help now? How is technology helping you on projects you're working on today?
Well, electronic information and platform sharing amongst the design team facilitates the most up-to-date information being in one place for all design team members to access. So it should mean less miscommunication and less errors, but it can only work hand in hand with good verbal and written communication between all the team members. You need to be aware that electronic information is only as good as the data that's been inputted. So the design team may be working collaboratively in 3D models, but there needs to be agreement on when you are going to have information exchange. So coordination is better communicated. And you also need to be aware that many contractors and subcontractors may still not have the technology that the design teams have, and that input from them to the design may have to be handled in a more traditional way. However, on site, you also need to remember that the vast majority of the workers will not be working digitally, and therefore material needs to be in a format from which they can work day to day. But overall, with the design team, it should be enabling better communication and coordination.
Thank you. And we've got another question here. Do things differ much when you're working on a new build project as opposed to an alteration refurbishment project?
Certainly not. Attitude to health and safety does not differ between a new build and alteration. However, gathering information for alterations can in many ways be harder if care isn't taken. Because if the information isn't very recent or hasn't been kept updated, how does the team know that? So really, verification surveys need to take place, and meetings, if possible, with those whose daily work is maintaining and using that building to identify what is there, what is new, and what the current issues are.
And I guess that you've seen from the presentations today that there's health and safety considerations for those building the building, but also those then that finally occupy and interact with the building. What's the weighting of tasks between planning for both?
There is no weighting. Either you address health and safety considerations or you don't. So those who build have different considerations to those who use and to those who maintain it, and they all need to be addressed to suit their particular circumstances.
Okay, now moving to Roland. What advice would you give Roland in terms of what more could be done at the start of a typical project?
I think there's quite a lot that can be done at the start of a typical project. It's an unfortunate thing that, as I said in the presentation, sometimes health and safety is not considered until stages 3 and 4, and that's the wrong place to do it. It's the wrong place in terms of the legislation, because things like CDM say that health and safety should be at the absolute core of everything you do. The appointment of the principal designer, as I said, is something which should be done at the very moment which design work starts, and under CDM, that could be the point at which somebody said, well, am I going to have a 1-story or a 2-story building to sort out this space issue? That's a design decision, and there will be issues that flow out of that. Other things which need to be considered in terms of certainly health and safety of the people carrying out the construction work is, where is the site? And all of these things are things which need to be thought about right at the outset of the job, because they will affect the way that the construction is carried out, they'll affect the way that the design solutions are adopted, and ultimately they will affect the way that activities are carried out in the finished building.
And now, I asked Sarah how technology could help now. I'm going to ask you a similar question, but almost like tomorrow's world. Can you look into the future and predict how technology will help us in the future?
Well, I'll start that with a question the other way, which is to say that if you cast your mind back 10 years and think about the sort of technology that you were using perhaps in your own car, and then so your car very well might have had a CD player, Things like automatic brakes and automatic windscreens and windscreen wipers rather, and stuff like that, climate control and all the rest of it were things which weren't even thought about. We've moved very, very rapidly over the last 10 years in terms of technology, and I think that certainly in terms of the next 10 years, there's going to continue to be that explosion. The sort of things which will affect or could improve health and safety on site are the use of information models, the use of technologies aligned to those. So let's consider the scenario, and some of this is existent, where operatives can go around and they can be tracked around the site in the same way as goods and materials are tracked around the site, thereby avoiding, even at its simplest things, holes in the construction, things which might fall on them, areas which might be hot or cold or dangerous, and activities like that. And they can be given audible warnings, or they can have warnings which are sent back to the site management to tell them where people are and what they should and shouldn't be doing. The other sorts of things that we're looking at even now is things like augmented reality, where it can be used for training. So you can take stuff out of the model, you can show the individual people or the client or whoever it might be the sequence in which you're going to construct the building, or even down at the coalface, if that's the right phrase these days, to show people how certain activities are going to be done. So you can simulate a lot of this stuff before you start constructing.
Yeah, maybe even more automated tasks from robots and drones and artificial intelligence checking that the right equipment's being used and worn, and nobody knows, but
automated clash detection is something which we have now, but there's certainly areas for development in that field.
Okay, back to today, and a more practical question, Roland, just to finish off on here. How would you recommend that clarity is achieved on projects with respect to the various health and safety responsibilities?
Well, one of the nice things which is in the RIBA plan of work, and was actually in the last one, is the opportunity to develop some sort of a responsibility matrix, whether that takes you through the design or the health and safety or any of the other strategies. There is the opportunity to identify at each of the stages who is going to take who takes responsibility for it, who does it. There may not always be the same person, but to set out clearly so that everybody agrees exactly who is going to do what on the project, and not have an argument later on whether it's looking at somebody's conditions of appointment or something like that. If you can have a document which everybody signs up to, that lays out who is responsible for doing this, who is responsible for doing that, who's going to carry out this task, who's going to undertake this activity. It's got to be a lot clearer than the sort of thing that we had 20 or 30 years ago, where there was no clear division of responsibility, and that just ends up, in fact, it ends up costing the client a lot of money, because they might end up paying twice for it, and they may end up picking up the pieces where something goes wrong because it hasn't been done.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Just to wrap up, just like I finished the other webinars, strongly recommend downloading the RIBA Plan of Work 2020. So go on Google, search for Plan of Work 2020, and you'll find at top of the search results is the RIBA page on architecture.com, where you've got the free downloads, the Plan of Work, the overview guide, 140, 150 pages for free, and a little template Plan of Work toolbox in Excel. All of Roland's illustrations were from MBS Chorus. So just to show that quickly as a sort of live software platform, you've got a project there. I've got some prelims, I've got a technical specification. And as Roland showed early on in the project, you might use some of the technical specification clauses here for things like asbestos survey, lead survey, technical guidance appears on the right-hand side. And then as the project progresses and more of the detail emerges in terms of the systems and the products, you can come and do technical specifications around the systems and the products that form that system. And it's worth mentioning at any any stage, you can also capture some of the thinking in the notes panel as well. So if you want to have a brief discussion or capture, you can put that alongside the NBS guidance itself. Jumping across now the NBS website, you can see on the screen here, if you want to know more about NBS products, we've got NBS Chorus, the spec platform, NBS Source, manufacturer platform. If you come into the resources, there's a whole host of case studies of different architects, different engineers who are using NBS on projects today. And we've also got our event page where you can see which webinars are coming up. So we've got inclusive designs not advertised yet, and also a bit more on information exchange coming up soon. But you can also go back to some of the previous topics and watch those for free on demand. So fire safety, sustainable outcomes, specification, and we also had the original introduction, which was a big 40-minute presentation from Dale Sinclair, the editor of the RIBA plan of work. So thank you everybody again for listening. I hope everybody found it as useful as I did, and take care everybody. Bye bye.